We know the story well on the second Sunday of Easter. The disciples, after Jesus' execution, find themselves sort of hiding out in a room with the doors locked. After all, they were a little worried that their association with Jesus might put them in danger. Their friend had been executed as a criminal, and I'm sure they worried that the same fate might befall them. Jesus comes to them and says to them, not once, but twice, "Peace be with you." And the disciples, instead of saying, "We can't be seen with you," or "We have no idea what to do next," or "We don't want any part of this anymore," they rejoice at his presence and consequently begin to experience a peace that they hadn't felt in a long time. It's not surprising that the disciples were pretty afraid. They had really been through a lot, and their future seemed rather uncertain, to understate the obvious. If I was in their situation, I would probably be hiding behind a locked door too. But then something happened. The Lord, he broke through the barrier that they had put up. And for the disciples, everything changed for them from that moment on. Now, there is much to be afraid of in this life. I don't have to tell you that. And being fearful is certainly not a sign of a lack of faith. It's natural to be concerned about our well-being and the well-being of those that we love. And we know from experience that there are times when circumstances or choices made by others can impact us in a negative way. And truthfully, sometimes our own choices do us harm. And so we often begin to worry. We begin to be overly concerned with what is around the corner, fearful of every decision, potential outcome, or challenge. And often our fears are directed towards big things, toward possibilities that exist for large groups of people, like the pandemic that we face together in our world. However, I would argue that the fears that really get the best of us are the smaller ones, the ones that only affect ourselves. Some of us fear not having enough money. Others fear being alone. Some of us fear rejection from our peers. Others fear the unknown. And these individual fears are more of a problem for us because they actually get us to live our lives differently. Get us to make choices that we either shouldn't or wouldn't make otherwise. In a certain sense, they get us to lock the door, to try to place a barrier really between us and what we fear. God doesn't seem to want us to stay locked in a room, but rather hopes that we have the courage to move out in faith, spreading his message and his love. In a particular way, during this Easter season, that we celebrate Jesus' victory, life triumphing over death. But that also means that we're celebrating peace triumphing over fear. A peace that only God can give. A peace that allows us to fully embrace the new life that God is offering. A fearful person is a person who's allowing him or herself to be really held back, to be locked within the walls of his or her own concerns and wants. But the person who's able to trust in the promises of Christ and rejoice in the victory that he has won will be able to move beyond their fears and begin faithfully continuing Jesus' mission, loving every person and in every situation. My friends, maybe you feel that you're in that fearful place, feeling that life has just been too difficult, too challenging, too disappointing, or too uncertain. It's as if the world is just winning, and we're on that losing end. And so, we want to play it safe, protect our interest, hedge our bets, and begin looking out for number one. The disciples probably felt a similar way. Life has gotten just a little too hard and a little too scary. And yet, if we sincerely desire to encounter the Lord, to know of his presence, and to follow his will for us, no barrier that we put up will be strong enough to stop him from standing in our midst and showering upon us a peace greater than anything that we can imagine. We needn't overly fear the challenges of life. So, let's learn something from the disciples and allow our faith in Jesus to dispel our fears and set us on a path to a rich, full, meaningful, God-centered life.